Hi, I'm Gary Striegler, and this is not going to be the ultimate be-all video on push sticks, because lots of people have great ideas on push sticks, but I just want to share something I do in my shop. Now, here's some examples of push sticks that you can buy. I mean, some people say you shouldn't use this kind. A lot of people like them. You can see this one's had a lot of wear and tear. I've got it close to the saw blade. So a lot of times what I like to do, because my shop is full of scraps, is make my own push sticks, and all kinds of different sizes. These are 1.5 inches thick. Somewhere around here, I think I've got one that's 3/4. I actually have a drawer right here close to my table saw where I can store the push sticks. So you can see this one's 3/4 out of scrap of plywood, basically the same style. And what's important is, for me, that I've got at least a little bit of this hook left, because what that's going to do, and at this point I'm going to go ahead and, well, one point I wanted to make. Sometimes if you've got, this is way over close here, you may even need to make a thinner push stick. I've seen some out of 1/4 inch masonite that you can push through. Again, when you're using a table saw, you always want to push your piece of material past the back side of the blade. I'm going to raise this up now. Another good rule is, as I'm ripping something, I want to keep my fingers 3 or 4 inches away from the blade, but I don't want to grab a push stick back here somewhere and start pushing down, because I could actually raise it up and that could lead to kickback. But a lot of times what they say is, I'm pushing this as soon as I start to see part of the table saw bed, then I want to have that push stick ready, grab it and push through. Again, what I'm sharing here is something that works for me in my shop. Your shop, your way you work may be totally different. So if you don't think this will work for you, then you find a different way. But I'm just sharing something that I do in my shop that works for me. Now, again, the reason I kind of like a sacrificial and a thicker piece, boy, here's one that I've used. You can see I've run a lot of the blade through a lot of different ways, and it's just about to the point where it's going to lose this. This is a little bit longer one, so that kind of helps keep it flat. Super important. You've got to know you only want to have your blade, maybe 1/4 inch above the piece of wood you're doing, with the exception of when I use my tape. And if you don't want to do this, you can do it with a bandsaw. But when I start out to make a push stick, I'm going to set the saw to about 1/2 inch, because this little hook, almost everything that I work with is 3/4 thick or thicker. So what you don't want to do is have this distance thicker than your wood, so that as you're going along, all of a sudden it hooks on your fence. All right, I know right where the switch on my table saw is. And the reason I have this blade up a little bit higher is because I don't want to undercut too far through. All right, here we go. All right. So I've got some undercut here, but what I would want to do now is either go to a bandsaw or a jigsaw, cut straight across here, actually probably closer straight across right there. And then I need to cut up this way a little bit, to leave a hook about like that. Now, what I actually did there is got in a little bit of a hurry. So I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit. And I don't know why, but we tend to like to have these tapering down. Maybe it's so that we make sure we're pushing down. I don't know. But almost all the ones I make are kind of have a taper down. And you can get that just with a simple jig like this. This jig is set up right like that. And if I thought about it, this is probably still good enough. I can, on this one, I may even back it up a little bit further, but this just gives me a little bit of that angle. That is super important to keep plenty of pressure down. I wouldn't question anybody if they even want to like run a screw down through there just to make sure it stays there. Now, you know, a bonus to this is you also end up with a door stop for your shop. I got a whole collection of them, or sometimes a wedge you can use to drive things in. All right. And this is, I think this is about maybe 8 degrees, by the way. But do whatever you like. All right, let me make this cut real quick. Well, there's probably no great way to do this. All right, the other thing, again, you want, it's kind of like a seat belt or whatever, you know, to be comfortable or to use it all the time, you want to be comfortable. So what I generally do is I'm just going to draw some kind of a radius there that's a lot more friendly to my hand than that sharp corner. Again, you cut this with a bandsaw, jigsaw, or whatever. So now that's more friendly to my hand. Just going to take, you know, any kind of a sand. And then the last thing I'd probably do, I'm not going to bother to do it now, is just take maybe a 1/4, 3/8 inch radius and soften that a little bit more. Now, the thing I would want to say, again, it's really important. Let's crank this blade way further down. Let's say that I was going to rip something that was 1.5 inches. A little further down. Now what I can do is, if I was making 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, well, if it was 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, I would just push this all the way through. But let's say we need to like do 3/4 by 1.5 inches. So now I'm going to just push this through and push all the way past and clearly lift my hand and get out of the way. And I don't care if I get a little saw curve from the end of this, because I can make another one. Again, kind of depending on how high you want to cut, what you're comfortable with. I made this one a little extra tall. I had 2x6. Again, that's just all about what feels good to you. But having something sacrificial that you can run through and then have a little ear on both sides is a great thing. And you know, everybody in their shop has got all kinds of scrap. So I'm not saying this is the only push stick you need, but this is a great option to have close by when you get ready to rip something, so that your hands don't get close to the blade and you can push the wood all the way past the back side of the blade. So again, it's not the only one you might need, but I use these all the time.